My name is Aubrey Callahan. I'm 31 years old, and I build things for a living. Renovations, additions, the kind of structural work that keeps a house honest. My company is small. 4 crew members, 1 truck with a dent in the passenger door I keep meaning to fix, and a reputation in East Nashville for showing up when I say I will and finishing what I start. At my sister's grand opening last April, I was asked to stand with the vendor team for the group photo. My name was not on the thank you wall. The seat at the founding partners table went to her boyfriend, a man who had known my sister for 5 months and ran a YouTube channel about thrifted furniture. I had brought an envelope to that party. Inside, a check for $5,000 and a referral letter to my best real estate client, a woman who moves 40 properties a year and had been asking me for months if I knew anyone good in staging. I had held that referral in my bag like a key cut for one specific door. I picked the envelope up off the gift table, and I told the room not to worry. I knew I wasn't in the picture. My sister came running after me across the parking lot in 4-inch heels. Half her launch guests watched her do it through the showroom glass. But here's what none of them knew. The envelope was never the real story. 5 days later, a commercial lease sat on my kitchen table with a sticky note marking the line for my signature. What happened in my living room that Wednesday night made the party look like a rehearsal. I run Callahan Builds out of a converted garage on Fern Street. It's not glamorous. The space smells like sawdust and the good kind of epoxy, and there's a whiteboard on the east wall where I keep active projects in dry erase marker, color-coded by deadline. My clients come to me because someone they trust told them I'm the kind of person who sees a job through. I bought my house at 28. A narrow craftsman with a porch that sagged on the left side and a kitchen that hadn't been touched since 1987. I fixed both myself on weekends. The porch is level now. I know which floorboard I'm most proud of because I put it in twice. The first time wasn't true. My life runs on load calculations. Every structure has a point where the weight lands, and that point either holds or it doesn't. And the only way to know which is to run the numbers before you pour the concrete. For years, there was one load calculation in my life that didn't pencil out, and it had my family's name on it. I had stopped running the numbers. It was cheaper that way. Then, on a Tuesday in October, my sister called. I could hear the excitement before the first word landed. She said, "I'm doing it, Aubrey. I'm actually doing it." And I sat down on the edge of my workbench, and I was genuinely happy, because my sister has a gift. She walks into a room and she sees what it could be. She always has. Even when we were kids and the apartment was barely furnished, she'd rearrange the 3 pieces we had. And somehow it looked intentional. She wanted to open a home staging and interior styling studio. Stage right interiors. She had the name, the vision board, the color palette, and a list of real estate agents she'd already cold called. What she needed was capital. To explain why I said yes before she finished asking, I have to go back to when I was 14. Our father was a carpenter. Not a contractor, a carpenter. He could build anything you pointed at, and almost never finished a project before the next one pulled him sideways. He left in the spring of the year I started high school. My sister was 10. Our mother worked the front desk at a hotel Monday through Friday and picked up restaurant shifts on weekends. And for a while the house ran on her schedule and the goodwill of neighbors. Then it started drifting. The way a thing drifts when the person who was holding it in place stops holding. So I held it. I started doing odd jobs at 15. Lawn work, painting, helping the neighbor down the street fix a fence that had come down in a storm. I was good at it. My hands knew what to do before my brain figured out why. I got my contractor's license at 22 and opened my business at 25. And I want to be clear, nobody threw a party for either of those things. My mother said she was proud and then asked if I'd thought about something more stable. I had learned by then that the kind of work I did was not the kind that earned applause. My sister grew up lovely and magnetic in the way that certain people are, as if the world arranged itself to look at them. After our father left, people looked at her the way you look at something fragile and irreplaceable. She learned early that being seen was its own kind of currency. She was not wrong. I understood the difference between us without naming it out loud. She needed to be witnessed, I needed to be useful. For years I told myself those were just two dialects of the same language. Two ways a family gets through. I was wrong about that, but I didn't know it yet. When she called in October, I didn't hand her a check and a hug. I'm a contractor. I drew up a promissory note, $22,000, structured repayment, both signatures in ink. She laughed when I slid it across the table. "You're so serious," she said. But she signed, the pen easy in her hand, the way you sign something you don't expect to be held to. I also gave her something I never put on paper. She needed a showroom, a real space where she could stage a sample room and bring clients to see her work. She found a raw commercial unit in Germantown, and I renovated it over 6 weekends, framed the walls, installed the floors, built out the display niche in the north wall that she'd sketched on a napkin. If I had billed my labor at the rate I charge any client, the number would have been close to $15,000. I didn't invoice it, she was my sister. That sentence took me a long time to look at clearly. The first 5 months, a check arrived on the first, precise, on time, the way I'd laid out in the note. I let myself feel good about it. I'd done what I always do, built something solid, made the math work. Then the payments stopped. No argument, no explanation, just a quiet first of the month, and then another. When I asked, my mother called me before my sister could. "She's in a growth phase. Don't be rigid about the schedule right now." And I noticed that my sister's Instagram had gained 300 followers that week, and that a regional design magazine had tagged her in a feature. I noticed all of it. I want that on the record. I noticed. But calling in a debt from your little sister means a conversation your mother referees, and I wasn't ready to sit in that room yet. So the payments went quiet, and I kept the column open. The invitations for Stage Right Interior's grand opening went out in March. The venue was the showroom I had built, walls I had framed, floors I had laid, the display niche in the north wall I had brought from a napkin sketch into 3 dimensions. I arrived at 2 hours early because she had texted asking if I could help set up. I helped set up. I adjusted a gallery hanging that was 3 degrees off level. I fixed a lighting fixture the rental company had wired backwards. I carried 6 boxes of champagne flutes from a van to the prep kitchen, and nobody asked my name while I did it. I had dressed for the occasion, dark green dress, low block heels, the good earrings. In the mirror that morning I had looked like what I am, a woman who shows up, who finishes things, who can be counted on in a room. The showroom looked beautiful. I want to say that plainly, because it's true, and because I built it. The floors gleamed. The display niche held a vignette of furniture my sister had sourced and styled, and it was genuinely good. She has the eye. Flowers in the window, soft lighting, a hand-lettered sign above the door in the font she'd chosen. In the center of the back wall, there was a large framed display titled Our Story. Photographs, names, a paragraph about the vision. I found it around 5 o'clock. I scanned it the way I scan a blueprint, looking for my name the way you look for a load-bearing wall on a plan, knowing where it should be, following the logic until you find it. I scanned it twice. My name was not on it. The loan was listed as coming from private family investors, a phrase that sounded warm and vague and attributed to no one. 6 weekends of my labor weren't mentioned at all. Under the heading Founding Partners, there were 2 names, my sister's, and the name of her boyfriend, Dane. I had met Dane in January. He was confident in the careful way of someone who has studied how confidence looks, and he ran a YouTube channel about furniture thrifting with 60,000 subscribers. He had invested $10,000 in the business at some point. I knew because my sister had mentioned it in the same message where she'd said she was still figuring out the repayment schedule on my $22,000. He had been in her life for 5 months. He was listed as a founding partner. I had built the walls they were standing inside, and I was listed as nothing at all. I gave it an hour. I've learned that certainty filed at the wrong moment does the most damage. Around 6:30, my sister gathered the people she wanted for a photograph. Her coordinator, a composed woman in a rust-colored blazer, organized the cluster near the display wall. My sister, Dane, his sister, her business mentor, the editor from a regional design magazine who had come to write a small feature. I moved toward them. A reflex. Because I am her sister, and it was her photograph, and some sentences you keep trying to finish, even when you already know how they end. The coordinator stepped in front of me with a smile calibrated for exactly this kind of moment. We're doing just the core launch team for this one. Family photos will happen a little later, after the formal ones. I said, I'm her sister. I know. The smile held. Just a few minutes and then we'll get everyone together. My sister was 6 feet away. She was turned toward the magazine editor, laughing at something. She did not turn around. I stood at the edge of the room with a glass of sparkling water that had gone flat, and I watched my sister arrange herself into the official version of her story. Founding partners at the center. The walls I built behind them, holding everything up, unnamed. Later, the champagne was warmer, and the room was louder. I ended up near the catering station. 2 women from my sister's network had drifted the same direction, talking quietly. They didn't notice. People had stopped noticing me a while ago. One of them said, "Okay, but how is she affording all this? A full renovation, the furniture, this whole event." The other one lowered her voice into the register people save for things that feel delicious. She said her investor situation is basically a gift. Family money, no real structure to it. She calls it her soft launch fund. The kitchen doors pushed open and closed behind me, open and closed. Soft launch fund, no real structure to it. I had a promissory note at home with both our signatures and $19,400 still on the balance. I had spent 6 weekends of my life on the floors she was standing on. The math in my head was very quiet and very clear, the way math always is, when you've already run it, and just needed the last variable to confirm what you knew. My sister's business was running on money she had described to her friends as basically a gift. I walked to the gift table by the entrance. My envelope was leaning against a small potted succulent. Cream stock, her name and Dane's written in my handwriting on the front. Inside, the $5,000 check and the referral letter for Helen Marsh, my best real estate client, the woman who could have built my sister's first year of business if she'd been ready to deserve the introduction. I picked up the envelope. The 2 people closest to me went still, the way people do when they sense a change in pressure. My sister materialized the way she does, radar-guided, lovely, arriving exactly when a moment needs managing. She was across the room, and then she was in front of me, and she said, "Aubrey, what are you doing?" She said it at a volume that made the nearest guests turn. The caterer by the door stopped moving. The room did that thing rooms do when something real interrupts the choreography. I said, "It has my name on it, I'm taking it back." And then, because you don't spend 17 years carrying something without knowing exactly how to set it down. Don't worry, I know I'm not in the picture. I set my glass on the table, and I walked out, heels on concrete, 3 beats to each step. Behind me, the room exhaled all at once. I heard her say my name. Then louder. Then I was through the door, and the Nashville April air was cool and smelled like rain that hadn't arrived yet. She caught me in the parking lot. 4-inch heels on asphalt, which was its own kind of determination. "Do you have any idea what you're doing right now? The magazine editor is in there." She was about to ask me for a quote. I looked at my sister under the parking lot light, and I said, "I do know. For once, I'm not the one holding everything together, so you can look like you built it alone." I got in my truck and drove home. The envelope sat on the passenger seat the whole way. It looked, in the dark, like something rescued. My phone started before I reached the highway. My mother's first voicemail, then her third, then cousins I hadn't spoken to in 2 years who had somehow already heard and had opinions. A girl I'd gone to high schools with sent a message that said, classy, with a period at the end, which I understood to mean the opposite. Not one person, in 3 days of messages and missed calls, asked what had happened before I walked out. An entire family reorganized itself overnight to manage the optics of my exit, and nobody anywhere asked what had made me go. That's the detail I'd tell a stranger first. Monday, I went back to work. Wednesday evening, 5 days after the party, headlights swung into my driveway. My mother climbed out first, which told me everything about the strategy before my sister had even closed her door. My mother hugged me. She smelled like the same shampoo she's used since I was a child. I let the hug happen because you can know something is a tactic and still feel it. My sister sat across from me at the kitchen table with a folder. Inside, a commercial lease for a larger studio space in the Gulch. 1,200 square feet, 4-year term, $2,100 a month. The landlord wanted a co-signer, someone with established credit and a clean business history. You wouldn't be paying anything, she said. The business is what they're underwriting. They just need someone solid behind the paper. My mother said family helps family get started. I let them finish. Then I opened the folder that had been sitting on the table before they arrived. I laid out the promissory note, both signatures. The original $22,000, the payment history, 5 months of payments, 3 months of silence, current balance, $19,400. Then I laid out a single printed page, a line item reconstruction of the showroom renovation, materials documented, labor hours, which I log because I log all my hours, market rate, total. My sister looked at the page. The renovation was a gift, she said. I never said that in writing, and I would tell any client that a verbal agreement for $15,000 in labor is not a gift. It's an assumption. You're my sister. I am, and I have been. For 17 years, in every way that costs something, I have been your sister. I built the room your business lives in. I wrote the note before anyone else believed the business was real. And last Saturday, I stood in the parking lot of that room, while a man who has known you for 5 months was listed as your founding partner. My sister shifted. My mother made a small sound. Then my sister did the thing I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. She stopped selling the lease and started selling the thing she knew I actually wanted. The thing that has a shape in me I've never been able to flatten. Sign it, she said quietly now, and everything goes back to normal. Better than normal. I'll make sure you're acknowledged, publicly, everywhere. You're in every photo going forward. You're the first call I make. You're my sister. You're my family. I want to be honest here, because this story is worthless if I'm not. It worked. For about 4 seconds, sitting in my kitchen that I've lived in alone for 3 years, I felt the full pull of it. Every family dinner, every photograph. My mother's face turned toward me instead of over me. The warm version of belonging, right there at the tip of a pen. She would have meant it too. Completely, in the moment, until the next moment needed something different. That was never the question. The question was whether I would keep paying rent on a room in my own family. I had been here before. Not at this table, but in every year. In every check I'd written, and hour I'd logged and call I'd made, so she could look like she'd done it on her own. The belonging I'd been renting had never stopped charging. The rate had never once gone down. I put my hand flat on the lease and slid it back across the table. I won't co-sign, I said, and I'm not calling the note early. The payment schedule stands, $600 a month, starting this month, as agreed. If the Gulch space requires a co-signer and the business can't carry that on its own, then the business isn't ready for that space yet. My mother said my name the way she says it when she wants me to understand I'm making a mistake. I've been the load-bearing wall, I said. For 17 years, I've been what holds the structure up. Load-bearing walls don't get to be in the picture. They don't get acknowledged. They just hold. I'm done holding up a room I'm not allowed to stand inside. My sister looked at me across the table, and for a moment, the polish came all the way off, the way it does when she's really landed somewhere true. You were always the one who showed up, she said, and it sounded like it cost her something to say it plainly. I know, I said. That was the problem. She picked up the folder. My mother rose and gathered her jacket and paused at the door with the specific pause of a woman who has more to say and is choosing not to say it. She chose the daughter who shines, the way she always has. And I had finally stopped outbidding her for the choice. I sat in the quiet after their headlights swept out of my driveway. And I thought about my father and his unfinished porch and all the structures I had completed that he had started and abandoned. I thought about load calculations, the ones that tell you exactly what a structure can bear and what it cannot. The work of my whole professional life had been understanding that a wall's strength and a wall's visibility are not the same thing. I had spent 17 years being strong in a way nobody could see. It was time to build something I could actually stand inside. The Gulch studio didn't happen. The landlord moved to his next interested party sometime the following week. My sister built the next phase of stage-right interiors out of a shared creative space in East Nashville. Hot desks, a communal sample room, a booking system she shares with 4 other designers. By every account I've heard, the work she does there is good. She has the eye. She always did. The talent was just wearing a lease it couldn't afford. On the first of the month after that Wednesday, $600 arrived in my account. I looked at it for a long time. It came again the next month, and the next. On time, no message, just the transfer and a memo line that said simply as agreed. The 4th payment came with an envelope, plain white, my address in her handwriting. Inside, a photograph, small, edges slightly uneven, like she'd found it somewhere and printed it herself. The 2 of us on our father's unfinished porch, the one that listed to one side the whole time we were growing up. She was 7 or 8. I was 11 or 12. She was laughing at something outside the frame. I had my arm around her shoulders and I was looking at her laughing. And my expression was the expression of someone watching something they built begin to work. On the back, in her handwriting. Found this in Mom's cabinet. I didn't know this photo existed. You always looked at me like I was already finished. I'm sorry it took me so long to look back. L. She didn't post it. No hashtag, no aesthetic, no audience. There was nowhere to post it that would earn her anything. A photograph mailed for the private reason that she wanted her sister to have it. The first thing she had given me in years that wasn't also a performance. I framed it. Simple wood frame, nothing special, and I hung it on the office wall. Next to my contractor's license. Next to the whiteboard with the active project list. Next to the window that looks out over the driveway where my truck sits with its dented passenger door, I keep meaning to fix. I'm going to let the payment run its course. 19 more months at the current rate, and then the note closes. I don't think about forgiving the balance early. I think about finishing what was started. About seeing a number through to the place where it becomes true. My mother and I speak on birthdays and major holidays. The conversations are careful and a little formal, like a room that's been renovated but hasn't quite settled yet. She still sometimes frames things as though I caused the damage, and I let it pass, because correcting her costs more than the conversation is worth, and I've gotten much better at accurate load calculations. What I know now that I didn't at the beginning, there is a difference between being useful and being valued, between being relied upon and being loved. I had been taught, without anyone meaning to teach me, that these were the same, that the reliable one was automatically the important one, that the person holding the structure up was also the person the structure was built for. I ran that calculation wrong for 17 years. My father left unfinished work everywhere he went. I spent my whole career learning to finish what others started. I learned it so well, I applied it to things that were never mine to complete. to a family dynamic that had calcified before I was old enough to see the shape of it. Taking myself back was not abandonment. It was the first structural decision I ever made for my own house instead of everyone else's. Some load-bearing walls, once they're finally allowed to stop bearing, turn out to be perfectly suited for holding something else entirely. I don't stand in other people's parking lots anymore, waiting to be called back in. I build the room. I know what it cost. And I am learning, slowly, with the stubbornness of someone who has always finished what she starts, to make sure my name is on the plans. If you've ever been the one doing the work in a room you weren't invited into the photograph of, drop a comment and tell me where they put you. I have a feeling there are more of us than anyone realizes. Subscribe to Peaceful Drama Stories because next time, the quiet ones have even more to say.